well, I always felt a bit like an alien, like a bit like that I was different to everyone else and wasn't really sure why. I also didn't know really how to focus. And when people would say, just focus or just pay attention in class, I couldn't really understand why I couldn't do that.
Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss unconventional productivity tactics designed for neurospicy people. I interview neurodivergent guests who've figured out secrets for getting a ton of amazing work done without burning out. I'm your host, Jeremy Nagel. I'm an ADHD software developer turned startup founder and PhD candidate. I built Focus Bear to help with my own productivity and burnout challenges. Welcome to episode 133 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by Hannah Badenhop today. Hannah has worked across many roles over her 4 years at Autism South Australia. As a neurodivergent person herself, Hannah strives to champion inclusion through everything she does. Hannah is part of the Neuro Inclusive Recruiting and Autistic's Guide to Adulthood project team. Her focus is to engage with the community to ensure that resources are relevant and reflect the voices of the community. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. It was great to meet you through the Neuro Inclusive Recruiting project, and I'm excited to share a little bit about myself and the projects I've been working on your podcast today.
Yeah, awesome. It was a really fun experience being part of that, and we might talk about it a bit later when we get to your work. But let's start out with your own journey about being diagnosed as neurodivergent.
Yeah. I was diagnosed neurodivergent through my mid to late teens. So I got my first diagnosis when I was 13 and then 16 as well for my secondary diagnosis as well. So it was a bit of a journey. So when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, that was when I was 13. That gave us a really good understanding of how my brain worked and potentially why I wasn't necessarily learning and focusing in the way that they wanted to me do in the school environment. And then we were thinking that potentially there was a little bit more and different things that they could support me with in school and then also in the home environment. So then we explored an autism diagnosis as well.
Okay. And what was it like prior to the diagnosis? You mentioned that paying attention or learning was
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, well, I always felt a bit like an alien, like a bit like that I was different to everyone else and wasn't really sure why. I also didn't know really how to focus. And when people would say, just focus or just pay attention in class, I couldn't really understand why I couldn't do that, or I couldn't necessarily pay attention or wasn't really good at paying attention in things that I wasn't necessarily interested in. And same that goes with friends. Like I didn't have a lot of friends. I would also often, excuse the jargon, but put my foot in my mouth. I would say things and people would say, oh, okay, that wasn't very nice, or they would take it differently to what I meant. And so I had a lot of problems with friendships as well. So those diagnoses really gave me clarity around why I experienced the world in the way that I did and gave me a bit of an understanding of a little bit about my brain and, things that I could do to support. It also gave me a bit of clarity around some of my earlier childhood experiences, especially around sensory experiences and preferences. So that kind of, yeah, all made a bit more sense once we got the diagnoses.
Well, it's great it was picked up pretty early on. And did things get better in upper high school after having those
Yeah,
diagnoses?
yeah, we found that the support was a lot better once I got a diagnosis. Getting through school in the sort of earlier stages of school, so like that primary school, middle school, heading into high school was really difficult because a lot of the subjects I wasn't particularly interested in. So
Hmm.
therefore I couldn't focus in on what I was doing. So my grades weren't very good. But when
Hmm.
I was able to hyper focus on my interests and follow my passions, I ended up getting very high marks marks and getting the ducks of my two passion areas
Wow.
because I was so interested in them. So from somebody who thought that they weren't very intelligent, who they did say that I might not even finish year 12, to then
Mm,
being the ducks of two of my year 12 subjects was a big difference. And I think part of that was understanding and following my passions.
that's awesome. What were the two subjects that you loved?
Yeah, so I really liked business and I loved graphic design. So part of graphic design is what I do now currently in my job. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more later. But one of my key strengths is creativity and innovation. So I think both in the business side and the graphic design side, I think both of them really lean into my strengths. And that's why I was able to do really well in those subjects.
Yeah, fantastic. An important message for teachers to pay attention to that if you've got someone who's not doing that well in class, it might not be them, it might be the environment.
Exactly.
Because do you think, in terms of the other subjects that you weren't interested in, were the subjects inherently disinteresting, or was it about the way it was taught?
I think a bit of both. I often found, especially when I got into university level, that I picked subjects based on the lecturers and tutors delivering the subjects. I found that if there was a particular communication style and the way they taught, I was able to grasp the material a lot better. I think it was a bit of both, but I definitely wasn't really keen for maths and science. So that was kind of why I didn't focus in those subjects. But definitely, I think the way it's delivered and how the person teaches and conveys the subject material is really important.
Mm. What do you think it is in terms of the difference between a lecturer that you'd enjoy versus one that you wouldn't enjoy?
I find different ways of communicating with people and varying it helps me keep engaged. So, having lots of visuals and explaining things through diagrams rather than just talking to me. When you're just talking to me and I haven't got any visuals to accompany it or someone acting it out or whatnot, I don't absorb it in the same way.
Mm.
So, people that would lean more into the visual elements of describing different processes or methods or information. That was the subjects that I did really well in versus the people that would just stand up there and talk.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like you're a really visual thinker with the
Yeah,
strength in
definitely.
graphic
I think
design.
that's one of my strengths is visual thinking. I think that's one of my big strengths as a neurodivergent person is that creativity, that visual thinking. And I think I carry that into other areas of my life, not just, education or work.
Mm. Great to hear. Let's move on to work now. Can you talk about the type of work projects that you're focusing on at the moment?
Yeah, so I am working at Autism SA, so Autism South Australia, and I have worked there for 4.5 years now. So I have been very privileged in my time here and had a wonderful experience. Throughout my work journey, I've worked on many different projects, but at the moment, I'm working on Neuro Inclusive Recruiting, which Jeremy was a part of the National Advisory Group. So, continuing to work on that and build more resources and things like that. I'm also working on a project at the moment which is centered around supporting hospitality venues to hire autistic people in South Australia. So, that project is really about educating and empowering employers to understand more about neurodiversity in the workplace and then understand the benefits of hiring autistic people and then giving them the tools and the information that they need to look at their recruitment processes and say, how can we hire autistic people? So that's been a really, yeah, cool project to be working on at the moment.
Nice. And I think you're also working on the Autistic Guide to Adulthood as well.
Yes. So, yeah, I'm working on a lot of projects at the moment, but the Autistic's Guide to Adulthood is a really great one. When I started in the Autistic's Guide to Adulthood project, I was actually a National Advisory Group member. So I joined that project very early on in my journey of self acceptance with being neurodivergent. I was very, I guess, cautious about who I spoke to about my neurodivergence. And I even had my camera off in meetings because I was a little bit worried about, judgment and things like that around being autistic. So I think over the years that I've been working at Autism SA, I've been able to connect with a lot of autistic people through this process. And I've gained a lot more confidence around talking about my neurodivergence and celebrating my differences. So now I am set to lead the national advisory groups for the Autistic Guide to Adulthood. So it's very
Hmm.
much come from, being a participant to now leading the national advisory groups. So we had some national advisory groups a part of the process back when it was launched. However, we know that the needs of the autistic community continue to change and evolve. So we're doing an update of the guide and getting some more autistic people to come join and talk to us about their experiences.
Amazing. Do you want to talk about what the guide aims to educate people on?
Yeah, so the Autistic Guide to Adulthood is a free online life skills guide for autistic adults by autistic adults. It shares the voices of people who have some tips around, living independently, romantic relationships, and explores those kind of topic areas through that autistic lens. So, through the new part of the project, we're looking to look at the modules and see if they're still relevant, update and grow those areas, and then also look at new module topics which are more relevant to today's autistic cohort.
Sounds really good. And I've previewed some of the changes. It looks like it's going to be a really helpful resource. And the Neuro Inclusive Recruiting resource was amazing too. And you did a great job as the leader of those national advisory groups. So I'm sure you'll do a great job with these ones too.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very proud of the Neuro Inclusive Recruiting resource. Like I mentioned, my strengths are creativity and innovation and whatnot. So I actually not only got to lead the advisory groups, but I designed the logo and all the marketing materials for Neuro Inclusive Recruiting, which was my first big sort of branding project from being out of uni. So I was very happy to be able to lean into different strengths of mine and skills to then, develop this project to where it is. And it was awesome to talk to employers and neurodivergent employees about their experiences and also gain connections from across Australia. And I think, people have stayed in touch, people are continuing to support each other, which makes me really proud.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So if people wanted to get involved, either just looking at the resource or potentially taking part in the national advisory groups, what would the process be?
Yeah, so you can always jump on the Autistic's Guide to Adulthood website. In our blogs and news section, we often talk about different ways you can get involved, including things like the survey opportunities and then the opportunities to be a part of the National Advisory Group. That's all on the website. You can also join up, which is completely free. You just need your email address and you can create an account to then access these modules and access them whenever you like, jump in and out of modules to help you grasp different topics and visit things that you actually want to learn about in your own time and at your own pace.
Hmm, fantastic. When you're not working, what do you enjoy getting up to?
Yes, I love I like to keep my interests very, varied. They often change all the time. I think
Hmm.
being an ADHD, I like go from one thing to another, but I often like doing little relaxation kind of activities that are stimulating for the brain. So things like coloring, but using like graphic markers to add extra shading and make it very, very, very cool. I've been doing a puzzle at the moment, which is one of my things to do at the moment. Love my crosswords and all those kinds of things, little things that I can do while I'm watching TV or a movie because I need to keep stimulated more than just watching TV. That's what I like to do in my time off, as well as dance. I like dancing as well.
Yeah. What style of dance do you do?
So I just do a bit of jazz, and that's a really fun to do. You get together with a bunch of people and just do it for a bit of fun and a bit of exercise as well.
Hmm, very good. So now switching gears to talking about when you're at work, how you optimize your productivity. What are your tactics there?
Yeah. Well, look, sometimes it really can be a challenge. And, being an ADHDer, I've come to accept that some days my brain finds it easier to focus than other days. And that can be because of, lack of sleep. It could be, if I haven't had enough food or water or sensory stimulation, all of those things can impact focus. But what I do, one of my key tips is to be aware of when your brain is hyper focusing and really taking advantage of that. So, what I do is when I realize that I'm kind of in a groove, I keep going and keep pushing it as far as I can. And then once I've done that and smashed out a lot of work, I'm then more kind to myself, give myself a bit more grace, and then allow the brain to sort of, kind of come down and sort of focus less, if that makes sense.
Okay. What proportion of your day would be like that?
Yeah, so I often go into hyper focus mode quite often, but as we know, the more you hyper focus, the harder you come down in terms of the energy and things like that. But I try and take advantage of those points because I often find that I'm a lot more productive than someone over just the standard work day. I can get hours worth of work done in half an hour. So, leaning into that. But as you mentioned, and as we've kind of talked about before, like the workday can be very varied in terms of productivity because that's just how our brains work. But one of the things I like to do to keep productivity, especially when like I've woken up in the morning and it's just really hard to start tasks. Sometimes you open the laptop and it's like, oh goodness, there's so many tasks. I don't know where to start, and it becomes very overwhelming. So,
Mm,
what I've been trialing recently is writing down quick wins. So, looking at things that you've had on your to do list forever, and if it will take under 5 minutes, writing it down as a quick win to then get that momentum going. So once you start ticking off those simple things, you're like, oh, I can do this. And then that's when I have more of that courage, especially on those times where, it's harder to get going, to keep going with bigger tasks and, keep that productivity rolling.
yeah, yeah, makes sense. A lot of people share that too. The
Mm.
eat that frog approach, where you start on the hardest thing. That's pretty hard to do, but
Mm.
doing it bit by bit, starting with easy tasks and building up the
Yeah.
momentum.
And breaking it down as well, like even sometimes I break it down to the point of reply to an email. And
Mm,
then therefore, once I've ticked it off, I feel like a bit of a boost of, oh, I can do this. Yes, I've completed that. And it gives me a little bit more motivation to continue doing tasks. So sometimes it's not just about breaking down like one project. Sometimes it's even just, like replying to a certain email or, requesting leave or, tidying your inbox, those little things that can take small amounts of time, but might give you that bit of that push to then keep going with your productivity for the rest of the day.
mm. And in terms of you're talking about the come down from hyperfocus can be quite hard and abrupt. What do you do to help with that? You mentioned being kind to yourself. Is there anything in particular you do to help you recover?
Yeah, well, I look at more of those tasks that aren't as difficult to do. So I kind of save them until afterwards so that when I don't have as much of the capacity to be doing harder tasks, I can do some more of those, filing, all those kind of things, those little tasks that are always on your to do list.
Mm.
Doing them when you don't have as much brain power. And especially also when the social battery is drained, that's another one where if you do those little tasks, it keeps you going through the workday.
Yep. Yep. Good idea. Do you have any advice for the audience in terms of their own productivity?
I think understanding about how you work best. I think it's really good to understand, in what environment you work best. So if it is working from home, then, if you can discuss, potentially working from home. If it's working in the office amongst other people, you know, do that, where you can. So looking at how you best work and where you're most productive is a really good first step. And then also looking at how you can, keep that productivity going by creating little tasks and ticking them off to give you that kind of sense of achievement to then help you keep going. But I
Mm,
think it's also really important to take care of yourself and be understanding. I think sometimes as a neurodivergent person myself, my experience is that I push myself to the absolute limit all the time.
mhm.
I don't understand when people say they don't give 100% or their 100% is 80%, whereas my 100% is 100%. So being aware that I often do that and that's how my brain works, so that potentially on times where I'm not as productive, not beating yourself up about it. As long as you're trying your best, you're breaking down those tasks, you're putting in those effective, strategies, so all we can really do. We need to be kind to ourselves. Some days will just be harder than others. And, you know, it's not going to be hard every day. So, if it's a day where you're not particularly productive and you've tried all your different techniques, just being kind to yourself, because I think beating yourself up about it and getting really frustrated can make it worse. So, being kind to yourself and your neurodivergent brain is important too.
100%. Inspired by that, we're going to be kind and take a quick break. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. Staying on top of tasks is easier than ever with Focus Bear's new To-Dos feature. Record a voice note describing what you need to do, and Focus Bear's AI will turn it into a structured set of subtasks and automatically prioritize it for you. You can also take a photo of a paper to-do list, and the AI will work its magic. I'd love for you to try it. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Okay, we're back from taking a break, had some water. And in the spirit of being kind to ourselves, you also mentioned that sleep can be a barrier to productivity. So, what do you do to help you switch off at night?
Definitely. Well, admittedly, I wish my sleep was a bit better. I think a lot of neurodivergent people, especially people with ADHD, very busy brains, do struggle with sleep and winding down. But there are some things that I do day to day to really help me get to sleep. So sometimes I find that I've got a lot on my mind, especially when I have had long periods of hyper focus during the day, or I've had lots of different things going on. My brain can be racing a lot at night. So, some things that I do that I find helpful is writing down the different thoughts in a book. So, just writing them all down. They don't really have to make any sense. They could be to do things, so things to do tomorrow. They could be worries that you might be having, could just be random thoughts about, any of your hobbies or whatnot. Just writing it down and then actively closing the book. And it's
Hmm,
kind of a bit of that symbolic closing of, the day, closing the mind. And sometimes I find that that can be quite helpful to get the thoughts from out of my brain onto the paper so I can put my head down at night.
that's a great idea. I like the symbolically closing the book as well.
Yeah, I
So
used to when I was younger, because again, I'm a very visual person. I used to kind of draw some locks over it and padlock it. So it used to be a lot around my anxieties and my worries. So I would draw like a bit of a safe and then put like a lock on it, kind of thing. So just a little bit
Ah.
of a drawing activity as well. And it was just that symbolic closing of the day, closing down the mind, and then putting your worries to rest or your thoughts to rest to go to sleep.
I love that. It's amazing to me how often in the evening when I'm tired, I feel my anxiety tends to spike. And then the next day I wake up and I think, why was I even worried about that? It's not a big issue. So
Yeah, definitely. I
happens there.
experience that too. It can be, yeah, I often find that when I'm tired, that's when the anxiety thoughts or the worries or things like that go the fastest. So, using techniques to, take them out of the brain, is in not actually take them out of the brain, but write them down on paper and put them in a book can help as well close off the day. One of the other things I find really helpful, and not everybody might find this helpful, but I do, especially because I have very vocal thoughts in my head. So my thoughts are very auditory in my head. I listen to affirmations and sleep stories to go to sleep. So for me personally, I find that sleep music isn't enough to stop the thoughts from going. So what I find is that when I hear someone else's calming voice, so affirmations, things like sleep stories, it can help my brain stop the talking, and then I get to listen to someone else's, calming, soothing voice as I drift to sleep.
Hmm, great idea. Do you have an app that you use to get them, or where
So
do
I
you
just
find
go
the sleep
on
stories?
YouTube. I like to vary it up, not too much that if it's too interesting, sometimes my brain will then focus on that. But I look at sort of, yeah, just different sleep stories, affirmations, kind of change it up a little bit. And it's just nice to not hear my own thoughts, especially when they're a bit more persistent. So when I've written them down and they're still kind of persisting, hearing some, lovely messages of affirmations like around confidence or that kind of thing can really help, me get to sleep and stay asleep.
Hmm. And then do you ever are you holding your phone when you're listening to it? Does it fall on your face, or how do you?
Yes, I often just put it by my bedside.
Hmm.
I look it up on YouTube, just find the video I like, and then I set a timer so that the timer automatically closes the app before the video finishes.
Hmm.
Because if you don't do that, sometimes on YouTube it will play an ad or it will play another video. So what I do is
Hmm.
I normally set it for a couple of minutes before the end of the video, and then therefore it closes down and I'm usually asleep by the time it finishes.
Nice. So people wanted to connect with you. Where would the best place be to find you online?
So if you want to connect with me personally, you can send me a message on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn and I will be engaging with this post and I engage with Focus Bear as well. So you're more than welcome to send me a message on there. In terms of my work that I do with Autism SA, you can always get in touch with us via our websites. We have different contact forms where you can contact us and get through to me, or you can send me an email. Other things you can do is jump on our social media and then follow us, and then therefore you can, yeah, get in contact with us, the project team, and then you can also keep up to date with other initiatives and things that we've been doing.
Wonderful. Do you have any final words or asks for the audience?
I think one of my biggest things that I like to think about and to talk to people about is that self acceptance around neurodivergence is a journey. So some people, when they get their diagnosis, they're happy. They're cool. Yeah, I understand it. I don't care who I tell. That's 100% me, and they are fine with it. However, I found personally that I thought, when I got my diagnosis, is yes, everything made a lot more sense. But I was kind of scared to tell people because I didn't want to be judged. And I think that's quite common for a lot of people because we live in a society where there are lots of misconceptions and you don't want to be seen less than who you are or any different to, yeah, who you are as an actual person. So I often remind people that it's a journey. I didn't start like this. And if you had said a couple of years ago that I would be on a podcast with you today talking about my neurodiversity openly, I would have probably had a panic attack and told you you were crazy. So, and it has been a big journey. I think taking those steps and talking to people when you feel safe about it is really important. I found connecting with other autistic people, especially through the projects that I have done with Autism SA, has really helped me gain more confidence when talking about my neurodivergence and to understand that it's okay to be neurodivergent and to experience life a little bit differently than everyone else, and that's okay. And then also the awesome strengths that neurodivergent people can have as part of their neurodivergent brains. Like I don't think I would be as, successful in my passions if I didn't have the creativity and the innovation and the type of brain that I do. Yes, I am very grateful in that sense for my neurodivergent brain. But we know there are challenges and, day to day there are some things that can be struggles and 100% like it's important to acknowledge them as well and understand that wherever you are in your journey, whether you openly tell people that you're neurodivergent or you kind of only tell some safe people or you don't disclose at work or you do, that's okay. Everyone has their own journey and to be respectful of that. So if you come across other people who are neurodivergent and they opt not to tell people, like that's fine. Everyone has their own journey of self-acceptance and it's very important to understand it's your own journey and follow it wherever it may lead you.
100%. And I think by you being able to share publicly, it also makes it feel safer for other people as well.
Mm.
So I'm glad that you've reached the point now where you do feel comfortable.
Yeah, and I think I also want to thank you, Jeremy, for like sharing your experiences as part of the Neuro Inclusive Recruiting resource. I think being surrounded by people who are brave enough to talk about their experiences, and in our context that we were working on was employment. It was really great to kind of be in a room where people were brave enough to share. And I think the more that people get together and have the confidence to share their story, that it can then encourage other autistic people or neurodivergent people, if they do want to, that they can disclose and that it's safe to as well.
100%. Thanks so much, Hannah. We'll wrap the show with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.